Name's Alvin Bear Scow, and I'm the son of the late Alice and Alvin Scow Sr., and I'm the grandson of Chief Billy Sioux, where I got this native name, Hayakun. It's translated basically standing on the bow of the canoe. And basically my connection with the boat is through my dad. His uncle, Johnny Scow, was the first skipper on this boat in 1927, all in the family. But there was Harry Sioux was Ollie's great uncle. He's my great uncle as well, so it's kind of all working in that village at the same time. And we call Harry's, we used to call him Howell. Harry Sioux owned this boat at one time, twice on it. And Mel Sioux was a skipper on this in 1958. And Harry owned it, I know, in 45 as he was running it. And everybody was table sailing back then. The drum had not come in then. Yeah, it's a big, significant change. My dad remembers as a child, being 7 years old, this boat coming to the village. That's how I got involved with it. Like, people down here didn't really know who the first skipper was until I kind of brought it forward. Then they started doing research, and that's how I got going with Ollie, who was my cousin. And I didn't actually work with it in here on 45 with him, but I did work with him on two other boats, one the gillnetter called the Margaret. We're gillnetting herring on the west coast, and we had 5 herring skiffs, and we had 13 people on this 34-foot boat. That was quite the feat in itself. My last skip with us when we were packing herring down here in the Gulf on the Canadian fish boat called Cape Perry. And this boat used to be tied up at Cape Madge over there. There used to be a lot of sailboats over there at one time. Now you go over there and you don't see any sailboats. And the skipper on this boat in 1958 was Nala Sioux, who was one of my cousins, and I actually fished with him for one season on the W11. And our escort boat, the East Isle, I was 15 years old on that boat, table sailing on that boat on the herring. And I started my herring salmon career was table sailing on salmon as well. That's not very many people who say that this day and age, the table sailing herring and table sailing salmon. And I was a deckhand, skiff man on W11, and on the herring was basically piling web. And biggest experience on there were in the Queen Charlotte Islands, and Doug Burnett got a big set over there and got 1,200 tons on one whack. We loaded 13 boats, and the name of the boat he was running at the time was called the Renown. And Doug Burnett was from Quadra. 13 of us on the 34-foot gillnetter called the Margaret. Well, we couldn't all sleep at the same time. The boat was so small and eating, everybody kind of rotating. And then we were going from one spot herring fishing to another, and they were basically getting towed around by packers. Yeah. Oh, it was like, I don't know if you really call it working when you're traveling, like when you're a commercial fisherman on the coast area. It's like being on a cruiser, different places all the time, like especially going to Queen Charlotte Islands is a lot of fun. Well, being in the village, I remember my mom riding on this boat in 1946. Harry Sioux owned it at the time. They went to Vancouver. My mom was getting married and went down to Vancouver to get a wedding dress, and they were coming back when it was kind of blowing, and they stopped in Powell River waiting for the weather to come through. Well, what my mom says about this boat, it was really tippy. And when this boat first came out, 1927, it was a big boat at one time. In my time, it went from big boat to being small boat and industry standards. So that was really, big, and went from table sailing to drum sailing. I remember one time we went up to, we brought it up to Guilford Island for a funeral. It was my dad, my mom, my nephew, and we towed my Boston Whaler up there for a funeral at Guilford. Well, if you're fishing salmon, you're basically looking for a fish to come through, jumping or porpoising. But in the herring, everything was sonar and sounder. So you're basically sounding and trying to line up the herrings go which way they're moving. Then you set the net. And once you set the net goes right out. And what you do is purse on both ends, like to catch them. Then you have a herring power skiff towing you off to keep the net, so they keep the fish in the net. And once you closed up, you started pulling the net through the power block until you got to the end where you had all the herring on the side here. Then you started drying it up, and then later times used herring pumps to pump it out. But when I was started, we used a brailer. It was basically a 2-ton brailer that went in the water and could have a whole boat rocking and rolling. When you're putting it in the hatch, everything had to be perfect timing, because when it came up, it had to line up to release a liner so that the herring would go into the hole. As the boat got heavier and heavier, you started losing that, so you had to have a winch to pull a boom back and forth because the boat wasn't rolling anymore. The beds, bunks are kind of uncomfortable. You weren't really in there for that long of a time because the days were long, and you're fishing like 14, 16 hours a day. Then you had to unload at night, so once you unloaded, you'd maybe get 2 or 3 hours sleep sometimes, 4 if you're lucky. Like, work was hard, but you had a certain amount of time to catch a fish. Like a derby fish, you back on. Well, now basically it's not much different than what you eat at home. Just you had some good cooks that could bake for you. That was a real treat, but not very often you had that. Latter years, I worked on this one vessel called Adriatic Star. Was double-decker, was built by Boeing Aircraft in 1937 when Boeing was still in Canada before they moved to the States. And the skipper's wife was Mitzi, and she used to make pies all the time, pumpkin pies. Remember that? That was a real big treat. My dad told us in olden times there's this hooligan oil grease that's when you're born. Basically, that was the first meal that was, put in a baby's mouth. So you had to acquire a taste to it. It was quite a delicacy. Even today, they sell it for like $1,200 for a 5-gallon bucket nowadays. I still eat it today. They tested at UBC, and it's really high in protein. Like cod liver oil, I guess, in a sense. We did eat a lot of fish. Mulligan, we called it potatoes, onions, and carrots kind of thing. Called it yusa in our language. Fish mulligan. We put a tablespoon of hooligan oil in the soup. Oh, honey hampa. That's what our old people used to say. Which basically translates, that means it's really good. Perhaps the highlight of it is when we brought the boat back and we were in front of the fishing pier when it shows up on video. It would be probably the most memorable thing for me, the way it was coming in, blue sky, sunshine. We left here on June 6, 2002, and we went to Vancouver and brought it back to Campbell on June 8, 2002. It basically, CRTV's camera equipment, we had 12 hours of video in 3 days. And Gord Lang, who was associated with the Maritime Heritage Center, asked me to put a video together for them. And I spent like 3 months editing it to come back and forth. Put needs more history in there and that kind of thing. That's why it took so long. When we went down to get the boat basically, when Oli donated to the Maritime Museum in Vancouver, the boat sat there for 6 years. And the boat usually supposed to come out of water every year for scraping barnacles off, taking all the copper painting. Boat never came out of the water, and all the time was down there, and had hair that long on its hull, had barnacles on it. And when we come out, how come we're going so slow? Well, when we're at the oil dock, we're trying to scrape some of the stuff off the side there. It's just, when the boat came out of the water at Perkins Road there, it looked like something from a lost lagoon. Like, pumps are going steady when we brought it back. Like, it was in pretty rough shape. I was listening to some of the videos on it of them, if they sent this to a shipyard to have it rebuilt for what they went into it. I think they were talking about it would have cost like $1.4 million for restoration of it. No, this was done with volunteer work, everything donated. It's quite an accomplishment from this community, and just glad they came through with it. Because had they not done it, it would have basically disappeared in there with a dry rot. Considering what industry standards out there, you go down and take a look at the dock, there's very few boats left in the industry, and very few that are First Nations owned. They were basically pushed out of the industry with the way the fishing has gone today. Now, sad, but just the way it's gone. Well, if global warming. We have that problem with sea lice in the area, and there's battles going on with fish farms against wild stocks, and it's been going on for years, and don't get hardly any openings here anymore. They got one opening this year for the whole season in the fall, and usually a normal season when the fish were really running, you go from probably May, June, all the way up to fish right through till December. I remember fishing salmon in Colifum River for, back then, just Christmas Eve at one time. Never home. Cost me my marriage one point. And last year I commercially fished with 1988. People had to move on to other jobs, retraining, and a lot of people jumped on with working in the aquaculture with fish farms. I myself, after 1988, couldn't do commercial fishing anymore, and worked on Painter's Livestock there for probably over 20 years, fish guiding out of there, sports fishing. Remember one year I had 11 tie in that one season. That was the highlight of my career there. Had a lot of fun. People meet people from all over the world. I had a lot of stories to give, and people really enjoyed it. Learning history for First Nations point of view. No, nobody uses table seine anymore. This industry is gone. It's basically drum seine now, and for the few openings, it's not viable for mortgage, insurance. That they just don't get any openings to really keep the boat in the industry anymore. Right now, not very many boats at the dock anymore. But one thing that's surviving is probably beam trawling, prawns, and that kind of thing. Black cod, hell of it. But the salmon has really been down probably good over 10 years now. Done on a drum seine now. And the boys that went out this year were using drum seine on Chum. They didn't fish the sockeye at all this year for a number of years now. It's been closed. The stocks aren't there anymore. Like when we fish salmon, we fish coastwide. A boat on the Adriatic Star, we fished Port Renfrew, blue line out there. There used to be 150 seine boats out there in that one place. Not like that anymore. You can't even find these boats anymore. They're just not there anymore. In the heyday of the herring on the west coast, we lost 16 boats at one herring season when herring went up to $4,000 a ton. Didn't matter what the weather is doing, boy, you're basically is going for them no matter what the weather is doing. When we're in the west coast or we're traveling out, we had boats sinking in front of us and sinking behind us. A lot of guys drowned out here. After that bad season where all the boats went down, that's when all the training came into place. I think I got my captain's ticket way back in 2002. It was basically a month at North Island College. You had to have at least grade 8 or grade 9 algebra, or you just weren't going to do the chart work or make it through that course. And you had to know it because once it came to the exam, boy, the questions you asked, they drilled you for an hour and a half. You had to know it to get the ticket. And they weren't captains or skippers. It's the different skippers did not have to have a captain's license. 2002, that's when came with all the training for life jackets. So I remember being up in the pool or deploying the life rafts and jumping into the immersion suits, jumping in the pool when they're trying to pull you out of the thing. And when at one point they actually want you to jump in the water and get in the suit when you're in the water. Once you got in, it was full of water. Then a couple of guys trying to pull you out of the water with all that weight was quite a feat. And one of those guys was claustrophobic. We had 4 of us, and then one of the guys says, "I don't like it in here. I'm going to get out." Because the things were not very big. And I never went overboard in my whole career fishing at all, really. Luckily, I had to really watch careful everything we did. And from wearing life jackets, we went to those horseshoe life jackets are using. They pull a string and it deploys. That made a big difference there. All the crews got to wear it. Even when we were guiding that painter's guests, and a guide had to wear them. Just for insurance. I remember my dad talking about my mom working in canneries in Coatiascu and them working in canneries on Rivers Inlet. That's where a lot of our First Nations people had jobs in the olden times. They weren't paid very much money, 25 cents a day. And but all these canneries, they just started closing up one right after the other. Remember the last two we had in Vancouver is Canadian Fish and BC Packers. They closed up shop. Now they're just places like Walcon and Browns Bay who more cater to produce everything, foreign fish, everything. Just to keep going, prawns. I know way back in the beginning we weren't even allowed to own a boat, or it was kind of really hard in the beginning for people, and things started changing. And they weren't even allowed to vote until the 50s. Yeah. What happened with Japanese when World War II happened, a lot of people had their gill netters, everything repossessed, and they relocated them to the interior. I don't think ours was that drastic. We just started losing licenses after they issued them, really. And a lot of people fought most of their life. Once they had a license and they didn't renew it, it was really tough to get it back again. And Ole, I know, fought long and hard. He never got his licenses back when he was after. He lost, I think halibut license, and he was trying to get that back for this boat, but he never ever did for his whole career fighting it. And a lot of people had lost licenses, herring, salmon, that didn't renew them, and some people are stacking licenses, trying to get bigger boats and that kind of thing, using smaller boats. Once you got a bigger boat, and if you missed 1 year of fishing with it, they basically took your license away. Well, when licenses were issued, if you didn't keep them current, if you let it lapse and you tried to go back and renew it again, they wouldn't let you do it. They were trying to cut back on the fleet. And the government, I think we had 2 or 3 different buyback plans because the fleet was so big. They were trying to cut back there so that there would be less boats to catch the same amount of fish, because there's too many boats and everybody's just getting a smaller and smaller slice, and they're coming back with these buyback programs. And I think these buyback programs are still in effect. I think last year my brother got rid of his gill net license because there's no openings anymore, so pretty tough to keep going. That work was hard back then, and there was a lot of fish back then in the beginning, but there's some years that was really bad too, and they always had to contend with companies and fishermen, Native Brotherhood, and Union of Allied Fishers worker, like negotiating. Sometimes it wouldn't open. Like I remember in 1985, we're on strike, and we're anticipating it open, so we went from Steveston out to Barkley Sound, and by the time we left and came back, it never did open, and that's when Mount St. Helens blew its thing. Got back to Steveston, there's ash all over my truck. Yeah. So it's basically just a boat ride that time. We've always had problems like that in the past where the strike really affected these communities. I remember my mom talking about when they were on strike, our people used to go after bottom fish like cod and fishing for octopus in this area. Actually, my mom was quite famous in this area for catching octopus. Well, we've got 35 cents a pound. You used to go along the beach and the tide was out and waited the tide to flood, and that's when the octopus used to come up. My drum setting is 5, and when I was table setting, it was in the herring we had 7 at one time. Yeah, then sometimes guys, instead of 7, they would go with 6. Well, in my career as fishing, I've probably worked on about 13 different boats, herring, salmon, like gill net, seine. Fished sometimes 4 or 5 years on one boat, and same on the herring, then move on to another boat. But some of the skippers, they don't last forever out there, they do pass away. I've worked for some screamers out there. That wasn't much fun. But usually if you did work hard, they kind of left you alone when you're on the boat if you knew what you were doing. Kind of picked my boats to like to, get on a good boat. I still got my whaler. I still go out in the summer. I'll never get rid of that. I actually prefer sports fishing on top of that because you're in command, and like Seymour Narrows up there, in our language we call that place Satsin. Its name is Seymour Narrows. And in our whalers we go through there any time. Tides running 10, 12 knots. Can't do that in these kind of boats. rock don't have enough power to push himself through, so he had to basically go through when the tides permit. That was a privilege working with Ole on this, because it was a real treat being with him. Even though he was skipper, we did a lot of traveling together, potlatches and stuff like that. It was comical. We liked to laugh, tease each other. Yeah. It's my mom's nephew. His father was Edward Chikite, and that was my mom's brother. So there's close connection with everybody on the boat, really. Gotta love the sea. Yeah. You love your job, you have nothing to worry about.